recording, and then turn this on so we can see it. Okay, I think you're ready. Just hit F5 or whatever, and we'll start. There you go.
So I will tell you a little bit about Germany. And some facts, there are over 85 million people, and it's 137,847 square miles. So it's the size of Texas. And then here you can see it compared to Iowa. And then the capital is Berlin. And we have 16 states. The states are, you can kind of compare them to how the states are here. So there are like laws and rules for the whole country. And then every state has like their own president and parties and their own laws. But then the laws of Germany, the whole go before them. So it's kind of like that, but I think states here are more independent than states are in Germany. And then we're a federal republic, and the official language and the only language is German. And then so here you can see Europe, and the countries that border Germany are Denmark, here, and then Poland, Czech Republic.
Yeah, that's a touch screen, a little advanced.
Czech Republic, and then Austria, Switzerland, France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And then there's the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. And then Germany is part of the European Union, and that was founded in 1951, and they were one of the founding members. And it's the fourth biggest country in the Union. And Germany is pretty important, and they have a lot to say there. And they have the most export in the European Union. And then so some things Germany is known for is their food, like especially beer. And that's just part of the culture. So I know people don't like, I wouldn't judge Germans for that just because it's like, it goes way back and that's just a part of it. And then like bread, and that's like a street food over there. That's currywurst. Yeah. And then something else are the castles. They're like almost every like city has one. And then this one is Neuschwanstein. That was like used for, as an example, like they took that for like the Disney castle. Yeah. And then something else is Oktoberfest. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's kind of like just for drinking. Everyone knows about it. And then that's like the traditional clothes that people wear for that. I think sometimes it's kind of funny because what people know about Germany is mostly Bavaria. So that's like the traditional clothes for Bavaria. Not the other states don't have that. And also Oktoberfest is like Bavaria. And most of the food people know also comes from there. So I think that's funny when like people here think about Germany and think about it's more Bavaria and not the other states. And also something else is Christmas markets that we have like during Christmas time. This one's actually my city where I'm from. So that's like the castle and the theater. So the smallest towns have Christmas markets. And something else is World War II. And I think it's important to know that it still affects our country. I looked it up, and for World War I, so they basically blamed Germany for all of it. And in 2010, we paid the last money we had to like pay to the countries, and it took us 92 years to do that. So October 3rd, actually yesterday, was our like unity day where the two parts became one. And so it took the 92 years to pay for World War I, and then same time we had to pay World War II. And I don't really know if the official like pay stuff we have to do is done, but Germany still like people expect them to pay stuff and they sue Germany and want more money. And I think 2022 Poland did that and they wanted over like $1 trillion for like what Germany did to them. And I think like I understand that we have to pay back and like it was Germany's fault. But I think there's a point where it's like a new generation and it was not our fault. So people can be like go over it. But yeah. And then also I think how it affects Germany still is that people don't have a pride for their country because they feel like they can't have that because of our history. And then also people won't speak up if they don't like rules the government does or whatever, especially during COVID. Everyone just did whatever the government said, even though they didn't like it, because we always had people like ruling over our country. And so there is not that idea of freedom as America has it. And then religion in Germany. So Germany is a Christian country, or is like that's still the main religion. And for example, like our parties, like one party we have is called Christian Social Party. So it's kind of still there, but most of the ideas you would have as a Christian are not part of that anymore. And so irreligion, so atheism and agnosticism are 35%. And then Roman Catholicism is 28.6%. And then evangelical Christianity is more the Protestant, so we wouldn't be part of that. It's 26%. And then Catholicism is more in the south, so where I am. And then the Protestants are more in the north, where my parents are from. And then Islam is becoming bigger because a lot of people from Turkey are coming to Germany and living there. And so that's 4.9%. And then Orthodox Christianity. And then we would fall under other Christianity. So those are like 1.5%. But then I looked it up at the Joshua Project and it said 2%. So it kind of probably depends on what you're counting or not. And then, so we have a lot of, how you can see that it's still like a Christian country, or it was. We have a lot of churches everywhere, like Protestant and Catholic churches. I think in my city, it's not a super big city. We have like 38 churches, and that's only only in Goldstadt. So in every city there are a lot of churches and old ones. So here are some of them are old pictures, but like our Baptist churches. So this one's mine, and I actually so this is the church, and then we live up there. And most of the buildings were like we either rent or we bought that one that was like a clothes shop before. And then this one is where Fletchels were, and then Snells are there now. And this church, we started, or like my church started a new church 30 minutes away, because in Germany, people don't like to travel long distance. So 30 minutes for going to church is really long, for like really far. So they would not go to church that's 30 minutes away. So that's why we started a new church just 30 minutes away, so that people from there could go to church. And this one is one like an hour away. That was also started by American missionaries. And so I think now most of the churches are now led by national pastors. So the time Mrs. Ellis and Dr. Ellis, they started my church, and that time there were a lot of Baptist mission missionaries, and most of them retired now, and they gave it over to nationals. And so now we start new churches and like take what they did. But there are still like the Snells are there, or I know if you know Mark Boyd, he's also Germany, and some others who still like start churches, but then they work together with nationals so that they can take that over. And then some things we do there to reach people or share the gospel. That's what my church does, and I know other churches do too. we do like book tables downtown. So we have books and tracts, and we just try to reach the people and talk to them. And then some do VBS, and we have a camp. And then one thing, I didn't really have pictures of anything, but I found pictures of that. So every year we have a soccer tournament in July. And so a lot of churches, I think we had like 10 or 12 teams this year. And they come from churches and invite unbelievers, and we share the gospel and just play soccer together. Because Germans love soccer. So that's a really good way to reach people. Yeah. So that's my city. And I think in Germany, it's kind of hard to actually reach people because they don't really care about it. As I said, there are a lot of atheism, and they think it's like your own thing, but they don't see that it's important for themselves. But then there are like a few people who like are really interested. So it's kind of hard to reach people because they just don't care. But it's also important to still do it because there are people who are really looking for hope. Yeah. So,
Thank you. Well done. And thank you for not showing any pictures of the Germany-Brazil soccer game. Did you guys, I don't know if you didn't remember that. They beat us like 7-1, wasn't it, or something like that?
Yeah.
And those are beautiful. You know, I'm one of those that thought that all Germans wore knickerbocker, you know, the same kind of, but that's just Bavaria.
That's just Bavaria. And then I think even Austria, like one state in Austria does that too. Like they have kind of the dialect.
Yeah.
Bavaria does too. But yeah, it's only Bavaria, no one else.
That's interesting.
It's not
Yeah.
their tradition.
And this symbol here is?
That's the symbol from my city.
For your city?
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. We don't have symbols. I mean, our states have flags. I don't know that cities have flags, but that's really beautiful. Yeah. That's great. Freie Baptist Church, is that it?
Freie.
Freie, what does that mean?
It means free
Okay.
or independent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Independent. Freie?
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you. Well done. Appreciate it. Okay. The only place I've been in Germany is in the airport in Frankfurt. Someday I want to get there. Has anybody else here been to Germany before? You have. Yeah.
I have too.
You have too. Oh yeah, you were there with Corel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you guys in this city?
Yeah.
Yeah. Neat. That's exciting. All right. Thank you very much. Well done. All right. Just in case you forgot, and I'm sure you didn't, there's no class on Friday. Bring that, because I'm going to be at the funeral for Dr. Ken Brown. And so we will not have class. And Laura, you said you were going to be gone anyway, right? So which is going to put us a little bit behind. We may have to be selective in what we share. And what I'm going to add, I'll ask you to do what we did before and double up on the reading. So the reading that you were going to do for Friday, just make sure you've done that and the one, thank you, and the one for the next time, for next Friday, okay?
So 5 and 6.
Well, like the reading for Friday.
Oh, wait, there wasn't any reading for Friday.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, yeah, that's right. I skipped that one. And I remember now why I did. I did because your paper was due on Friday, and I didn't want to give you extra work to do. So then what did I do? I went and gave you an extra day anyway. Paper because Ella wasn't crying. No, I'm just joking with you.
No, I know.
Okay, so we are ready. We are still talking. Did we finish Ed Narm Judson? We started into the white man's graveyard, correct? If yes, in fact, I showed you pictures.
Robert Moffat.
Right. I'm trying to remember exactly where we were on that. Did I give you? Which one?
11.
11, okay. Yeah, interesting. His initial failure to master the language. Who did we just talk about that had trouble with the language?
Judson.
Yeah, Judson, his wife learned it faster. She had trouble. I mean, it's amazing how many, which is just a really, really good reminder that if you're horrible with learning a new language, that does not mean that you will not be able to work in cross-cultural ministry. It just means that you may have a little more trouble. Miriam, how hard would you say it was for you to learn English? You're doing very well now.
I don't know because I learned it for so long. Like I think I had it in school for like 10 years.
Okay.
So it was always like part of school. So I like not that I grew up learning it,
Right.
but kind of like in school. So I don't know. I think I have a really hard time learning languages, but because it was like a part of it
Yes.
every year.
Okay.
But I think it was hard. I think I learned it better like when you're actually in the country.
Okay. Yes.
And then
Yes.
you like, especially like talking to people and like knowing what you talk about and stuff. But yeah.
You know, it is absolutely true that you'll learn it much better when you're in the culture. Does your dad speak English? When he's here, will I be able to speak to him in English?
Yeah.
And your mom too?
Yeah, she
Okay,
is.
good.
Yeah.
They're going to give a word at our banquet, at our
Yeah.
missionary conference banquet.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Is that for everybody?
The banquet? Yes. I mean, you don't have to come yet. We actually want signups, but yes, it's for everybody. The students, we've got really good responses from this. They seem to really enjoy doing that. And people who work at Benson do not have to, we're not having Benson do the meal because we want the Benson workers to be able to be at the banquet. So we'll have a sign up for that. All right, so look, he translates the Bible in 29 years. That may sound like a long time, but for one man to do it, that's pretty good, especially for somebody that struggled with the language. And he starts a school, and there's a spiritual awakening that takes place in Africa as well. As you know, Africans are very, they're much more expressive than Westerners are. And so the idea of a spiritual awakening in some ways actually sounds more natural in an African culture than it would in a Western culture, even though God can work despite cultures. He has children, and I'm going to pass through some of this rather quickly. As you know, he has a daughter who is going to marry somebody we know, right? So they return to England to retire there. One of the big questions that comes up in missions is what happens when a missionary retires? Do you stay where you are, or do you come back? And the answer is all over the place. No. For instance, missionaries who have children who've decided to stay in that country and have families there, oftentimes they'll stay. They'll retire in the country. Others come back. There's really no pattern to that. Okay. This is an interesting shot of the stone church that was built in 1838 in the context of his ministry there. Pretty neat. The windows obviously are new. I'm guessing that there were no windows when it was built. It was probably just. So now don't forget Robert Moffat, because there's a connection here by marriage with David Livingstone, right? That, by the way, is far and away the most popular picture and photograph of David Livingstone. Why do we talk about his reputation in England? Where was he born, David Livingstone? I know I've mentioned it and you read about it. What country was he born in? It's the same one that Moffat was born in. Where was that? Scotland. So here, David Livingstone is Scottish, but, and I'm going to jump ahead here, when he dies, he requests that his heart be buried in Africa. But so they do that, and they take the rest of his body and they bury it in England, in London, at Westminster, which they don't bury just anybody at Westminster. So interesting, even though he was born in Scotland, he was a Scotsman by birth. His fame in England was incredible. Well, he had personality issues. So are we surprised? Can you, I don't know how much you've read on him. How, if you had to describe his personality, how might you do it?
Maybe domineering and stubborn because he had his own ideas.
Yeah, I think you got it right. He was domineering, he was stubborn. What was the third thing he said?
I just said because he had like his own ideas.
Yep, he was very persistent about doing what he wanted to do. But there is a tenderness in David Livingstone that doesn't always come out. And so we'll talk about that. So there you go. He was born in Scotland. He was determined. Speaking of determination, he wanted to learn. He had a job in a factory, and he would put a book. He'd find books, and he'd put them up so he could read them while he was working. You know, and he just was. He had a real inquisitive mind. He wanted to learn. God was going to use him, and he wanted to go to China. So he ends up where? Where does Livingston end up working?
Somewhere in Africa?
Yeah, Africa. But his original desire is to go to China. But he meets Robert Moffat, who's a missionary in Africa, right? In Kuruman. So he ends up, I don't remember if I mentioned his marriage to Moffat's daughter, but he marries Robert Moffat's daughter and becomes a missionary in Africa. So he arrives in Africa in 1840 and he studies the language there. Now, which language? She probably said, if you have it there in front of you and you look, I don't remember, lots of languages in Africa. But he does study the language. And just like Moffat, he criticizes what he sees at Cape Town. The missionaries living the nice lifestyle, isolated from the Africans. That really, it bothered his father-in-law, and it bothers him too. It used to be if like when I was a young person and missionaries would come from Africa, you would hear them talking about living on a compound. Most of them did at that time. It was considered dangerous or unsafe to live, in the regular neighborhoods. And you wanted your kids you didn't want them to lose their American culture. And so a lot of reasons why people lived on compounds. That is not nearly, in fact, I don't personally know any missionaries in Africa, maybe you do, who live on a compound, a little mini USA in the middle of Africa. Okay, people are just understanding now that if we're going to reach the nations, we need to live among the nations. Yeah, Ella?
For you and Becky, were you concerned with having your kids understand American culture or not?
No, because in our home we spoke English, and even though we lived in a Brazilian home in a regular neighborhood, we still had a lot of American traditions. And there was a time when I may have been worried about that. Like, I like being an American, and I'm not interested in becoming something else. But it didn't take me long to change my mind because there's so many good things to learn from the host culture. I mean, Miriam, you coming here, you don't want to stop being German. But at the same time, there are probably some things you saw here that you liked, and you thought, I would like to be like that. And so a missionary colleague of mine who's now with the Lord, he said, he always told his children, get the best of both cultures. And if somebody would ever ask me, which culture you'd like better, Brazilian or American? That's a loaded question that you don't want to answer. So what I would say is there are things in both cultures that attract me. And so it's not a choice between the two countries. It's learning to glean the best from both. Great answer. So yeah, there's strife in Kuruman. Now that's where Moffat is. His father-in-law, right? He goes to Kuruman. And there's strife. There's theological strife, personality strife. You expect if you're going to go to the mission field and work with somebody that they're all going to have their halos on straight, right? And everybody's going to be godly. And the missionaries are regular people. We get it. I am thankful for the group that I worked with in Northeast Brazil. We really had a very good group of people to work with. They did missions work in an exemplary way. Okay, and not because of me. It was already that way long before I ever came. But I remember Baptist Missions once telling us that Northeast Brazil was an exemplary field. And I think you had a really, in Germany too, the Missions missionaries, I think, had a really good reputation. They worked well together. That's good. But that's not what he found in Kuruman. So he takes off. Well, look, he's not going to explore because of the strife in Kuruman. He's going to explore because he has ants in his pants. I'm sorry, is that a new one to you? Okay. Yes, ants in his pants. He can't sit still. He's one of these guys that's got to be discovering something new and different. Okay. So he starts going north to explore. And he ends up making a trip with a guy named Roger Edwards. You don't really need to remember his name. It's just a guy that he did some exploring with. I'm going to show you here. Excuse me, here's the map. Okay, here's Kuruman, where the Moffats are, right? This is the Cape Colony where the Moffats landed and Livingston, and were really bothered by all this strife. And they go up to Kuruman and find problems up there too. So now he's going to head up farther north. Okay, wait a second. What did I say? Yeah, my boat's right here. So, so you can see it's not. It's a ways. I mean, it's a huge continent. Just man. So this may not look very far away, but it is. And this is cool because this even gives you the years that he made these trips. Okay. And so now when we read about Mary Slessor later on, she's up this way. She's in a whole different area. Okay. I have never set foot on African soil. I want to go sometime. I told Megan Hunter that I'd never been there. What? Yeah. Someday I'm going to go. All right. Can somebody tell me how he got injured? Remember Matthew?
Line on his shoulder or something.
Yeah.
It was like it healed, but it wasn't like fully back to normal. So talking about that in the book.
Yeah, lions were a pest at that time. They were, and so they were out trying to kill one, and he actually shot it, but didn't kill it. I have actually been within about 2 feet of a lion. I was at a zoo with my kids and their grandkids, and they had this big, huge window about this thick. There was a lion sitting right there. We actually just looked right into his eyes. That was at St. Louis Zoo. I don't remember. Anyway, so he shot it, but it didn't kill it, and it would have killed him if one of his friends, his African friends, hadn't finished off the lion. He killed the lion, but in fact, I think it was his left hand. So that would be that one. I think he would always keep that one hidden because it was mauled pretty badly. So even after he healed, he wasn't really able to use that hand much. So he goes back half, just still healing up, and he goes back to visit Mary. Remember, Mary is, what's her last name? Who's the guy we just studied? Moffat. Mary Moffat is Robert Moffat's daughter, right? So he left Kuruman to go exploring, but he met her there, and he goes back, and they end up getting married. But she's probably not ready for what's going to happen. Maybe she is, I don't know. But they end up living kind of a semi-nomadic lifestyle, which means they're moving all the time. See, Moffat stayed in Kuruman. He settled in there, and that's where his ministry was. So his family was used to being in the same place. Not Livingston. Livingston's got to explore new places. And sometimes people get critical of him. And, I don't know. I mean, some of it actually said that if you're gonna try to explore the way that Livingston explored, you probably shouldn't even get married. It's just too hard to have a family and do what he was trying to do. Okay, that's an opinion, but I'm not gonna say that. I mean, there were times when he took his wife with him and his family, other times he left them behind. And he was criticized on both ends. If you leave her behind, you're neglecting your family. If you take her with her, you're dragging them through all kinds of very bad situations and all that. So poor guy couldn't win. His wife was very understanding. In fact, who's reading it? Is one of you reading about Livingston in the book? In the 25 surprising marriages? I thought one of you took Livingston. Maybe you don't remember.
I can't remember what I'm supposed to read about.
Huh?
I can't remember what I'm supposed to read about.
And, I don't know if I wrote this down. I don't think I did. Do you remember who you're reading about?
No. Maybe I'll take Livingston.
If you put the names up there, maybe we can pick them again.
Okay, hang on one second. Let me pull those up. Hang on. All right, let me see. Amazon. No, that's not what I want. 25, so, all right, there it is. Let me just pull this up. Here, I'll put it over here. And let me see if I can get a table of contents here. Usually you can look inside. No.
It says read sample. Under that, it says read sample.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Thank you. All right, here they are. Well, there's 2 pages of them. So the ones that I would have given you would have been, somebody took D.L. Moody.
I think that was me, I'm pretty sure I did.
Okay, all right. Please write it down because
Okay, I'll put it on
Um,
my calendar.
let's see. William and Catherine Booth, I also allowed as missionaries. No. All right. Hudson Taylor and Maria. Somebody took them.
No, I have.
All right, let's go through it. Let's see. George Mueller, I did allow somebody to take them.
I had Mueller.
You had Mueller? Okay, remember that if you would. Because I'm not gonna write these down. D is a dry old stick. That's a good one, but when that's not. Let me see. Okay, William and Dorothy Carey?
I had William Carey.
You did, okay, all right. Livingston, haven't figured that one out. Ed Nair and Ann Judson.
I think I had Hudson Taylor.
Okay, you take Hudson Taylor.
Mhm.
If you didn't, you have him now. All right, so who's that leave?
Yeah, I think I had Livingston.
Okay, why don't you take Livingston? Everybody else identify theirs. Clara, you heard these, so take one that's not one of them. If you have a question, I can get together with you on that. All right. Okay, don't forget, please. It's
I put it
gone.
down.
Gone forever.
Those people, the ones we're supposed to do in class?
No,
or-
I kind of like, did I say, let me look at here on the instructions. See if I said. I didn't say, so I would kind of like those to be the in-class ones. They're very interesting, talking about the husband and wife relationships and all these. So yeah, make those the in-class ones, then you can do somebody else for your written one.
And then does it matter which one we do for the written one? Like,
No,
do they
no.
also have to be in like the group you said?
No, I just don't want there to be duplication in the in-class
Yeah, yeah.
ones. Yep, so, okay, good, well, glad we got that figured out. Strife with the in-laws. Ooh, may that never happen to you. Okay, I'll just say this for sake of time. The biggest problem that he had with his in-laws was with his mother-in-law, okay? And does anybody happen to remember why she criticized him? What was the main thing she was upset about?
That he kept bringing the kids along and the wife along on the trips.
She was very, very upset about him dragging his wife and children through the muck and mire on his explorations. And there's a letter, copy of a letter in your book where the excerpt is from her to him. She basically calls him an irresponsible, unloving husband. Read that. I think that with time, the Moffats did come to respect him, even though and Robert Moffat was also a very domineering man. And so he wanted his wife and kids right there where he could control them. So he did have an awkward relationship with his own family. Yes, Miriam.
Question, did Mary have a problem with that? Like, did she, because, I don't know.
I'm going to let him answer that question in the book. I will just answer it this far and say she was a remarkable woman. She was really a special lady. So Matthew, I won't steal any of your thunder on that. But I have a positive image of her. Yeah, he did decide at one point to send his family to England. Now, remember, Dr. Stupka was talking in chapel this morning about Liberia not having, well, just imagine, I mean, they had nothing. Most Africans were not educated at all. And, you know, here he has a British family, and he sends them back to England to study, even though he's from Scotland. And then he just dives into exploration. It's like once his family is on board the ship and heading back to England, he just full steam ahead in his exploration. Okay? But he does eventually make a trip back to England, and he has a whole 3 days with his family. He's criticized for that too. He didn't, because by now he is a hero. He is a nationally known household word. Okay? And so he comes back, and everybody's wanting him, come here, come there, meet the Queen, you know, blah, blah. He's meeting everybody. By the way, Billy Graham went through that same thing. I just read in the same book, 25 Surprising Marriages, we read the one about Billy Graham. And he became, you know, he had tea with the Queen and all that, you know, and that's kind of the way that Livingston. What was his conclusion? It was less than glorious only from a human standpoint. Do you remember he was found in Africa, and he was in a kneeling position? Apparently he had been in prayer, or, you know, just, you know, maybe crying out to the Lord, and that's the way he was found. And as I said, I mean, he was so shriveled up by then. I mean, not from being dead, just from being old. He had malaria. He had, you know, he was, I don't remember his age when he died. You have it there. 50s, late 60? Thank you. So I'm 63. He's about my age when he died. But, you know, he had to succumb to all kinds of the climate, you know, the diseases and things. And to live to be 60 for an African was pretty good. But as I mentioned, it's less than glorious from our vantage point, but looking at his life and his devotion to the Lord, he really loved the African people. That's why he wanted his heart buried there. And where did they bury his body? I mentioned it already.
Westminster.
Westminster, in England. Very great honor for anybody to be buried there. To this day, his name is a big name. This is just interesting. There's a great rift valley, and I don't know if you've studied this in your science or geography classes, but and the reason I point it out is because it actually goes all the way up through the Middle East, right? It goes right up through Israel. There's going to be a great earthquake that takes place during the tribulation period near the end, and some think that is connected. The whole thing is one great big huge fault line in the earth. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of neat. It's nothing there that you really need to remember. You can actually, yeah, this is not a really good Google Earth shot, but Livingston did visit Lake Victoria there, Victoria Falls. I don't know how well you can see, it's right there, it's that dark spot. But he really did open up. Now, you know, the devil always tries to piggyback on what God does. So he's opening up these pathways for missionaries, but what do people use them for? Slave trade. And some people have actually criticized Livingston, and I think that's very, very unfair. I mean, somebody was going to open up pathways sooner or later. Well, if people use them for slave trades, that's their problem, not his. So that was never in his mind and heart to do. And if somebody abused what he did, then the problem is theirs, not his. Now, there's a little closer shot of Lake Victoria. And all right, just really quickly, we have a few minutes. This is another part of Africa, okay? And this guy's name is King Leopold, and this is the Congo, all right? So you all remember Paul Ward, right? And did he get married already? He was engaged. He was engaged to an MK from Africa. I don't remember if he got married yet. Anyway, Paul was from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And that's where the only thing I'm going to mention about this guy, just because it's at the time, is that he was from Belgium, okay? Because Belgium controlled the Congo for many, many years. And finally, does anybody remember, this is just off the cuff, what the Congo is known for producing that's used all over the world? Rubber plants. So that manufacturing of tires and other rubber products, Congo is a huge, and he controlled that area for a long time. He was not a nice guy. And so eventually the Belgian Congo became independent. But when that happened, like so often in Africa, people were used to foreign domination and they did not know how to govern themselves. And so when a government like Britain or Belgium or the Netherlands would move out of Africa, it left a huge political vacuum. And what happens? What happens when that takes place? What's the result of that? Civil war, tribal wars. They don't know what to do. There's usually a domineering tribe, and so that one of the reasons why you read so much about civil wars in Africa is because of nations that had never learned how to govern themselves. And so when they pull out, there's just all kinds of strife. Very sad. Congo had lots and lots of that. Mary Slessor, we'll just get started on her. Can anybody tell me what made her work in Africa revolutionary? We're not talking about a political revolution, okay? But what is it that she did that was so revolutionary?
Like how David Livingstone went out on expeditions and kind of traveled in, and she did that as well, but she was a single female missionary and they didn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing for a Livingston to do that, right? A man. But she also ventured out in places where men were afraid to go. Now, did she have an advantage? What was it?
People aren't as scared of women.
Yeah, you see a single woman coming, you're probably not going to get your spears out to defend yourself, you know? You see a group of men coming, different story. So, but she was, as she grew up, well, here we're getting ahead of myself. She sometimes is painted in a Victorian image, wearing these long flowing British, colonial type dresses and stuff. That is not the Mary Slessor that we're studying, okay? She became about as African as she could. In fact, if you haven't already read about her in the book, one person that went to visit her actually had to stay far enough behind her that he didn't notice things about the clinging dress that she wore and stuff that, we would call it immodesty. She just called it African. She wasn't trying to be immodest. She was very African. She is also born in Scotland. So you got Moffats, you got Livingston, and you got Slessor. They're all Scottish missionaries. There you go. I love to hear Scottish people talk. Love it. And God prepared her in a special way because her father was very neglectful. Her mother did have a missionary heart, and that really rubbed off on Mary. Okay, and she had a vision of going, and not a vision like a dream, and just because of her mother's missionary heart, she developed a desire to go to Calabar, which is present day Nigeria, or part of present day Nigeria. And let's see. So she arrives in Duketown, way down this, let's see. Yeah, down the south, and she is very dissatisfied. Just like, it seems like everybody that goes there ends up being dissatisfied. Same thing. And she has struggles with sickness and actually has to go back home for a furlough to recover. So she really wrestled with the climate as well. And the illnesses and all of that. And we'll leave it at that for today, okay? I moved a little fast there, but just trying to catch up a little bit, especially since we don't have class on Friday. So Clara, no recording on Friday. We'll see y'all on Monday, Lord willing.